Thanks, Jane. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Virtual Policy and Resources Committee meeting here at Pendlebury Council. My name is Councillor Mohammed Iqbal and I'm leader of the council and also chairman of this committee. Before I proceed, I will do a roll call of councillors that should be on this committee. And what I'd ask those councillors is when I call your name out, if you could just indicate that you're present and then just put yourself back on mute, please. So I've got Councillor Nadeem Ahmed.
Present.
Thank you. Musawa Arshad.
Present.
Thank you. Colin Carter.
Present.
Thank you. David Clegg.
Present.
Thank you. Sarah Coburn Price.
Present.
Thank you. Tommy Cooney.
Here.
Thank you. Mike Goldthorpe.
Present.
Thank you. Julie Henderson.
Present.
Thank you. I'm obviously here. Yasser Iqbal.
Yeah.
Thank you. Brian Newman. No, Brian's not with us yet, so we'll check back in a few minutes with Brian.
Chairman, in Brian's absence, Councillor Tom Whip.
Okay. So is Tom subbing for Brian then, David?
I think Tom is subbing for Brian, yes.
Okay. Councillor Tom Whip.
Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Yvonne Tennant.
Yeah, I'm here.
And finally, David Whip.
Present and correct.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Before I move on to the agenda, I also have two speakers who I just wish to check are with us. In terms of the application at Bailey Street, Earby, I have Annette Brown.
Here.
Okay, thank you, Annette. And then in terms of the change of use at the Palatine Working Men's Club in Nelson, Rahila Iqbal.
Rahila has asked for the link to be resent to her. We're doing that at the moment.
Okay, that's fine, Jane. Thank you very much. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we'll move on to the agenda. And item 1 is declarations of interest. Is there any councillors who are present at the meeting that wish to declare any interest? No. Thank you. Item 2 is public question time, and that's received for up to a maximum of 15 minutes. Any questions from any members of the public who are on this call on any item which is not on the agenda? Do we have any members of the public joining us, Jane?
No, we haven't.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on to the minutes of the last meeting. Everybody happy that they're the correct record? Anybody disagree? No. Thank you. We'll move on to the planning applications, and the first one that we've got is for the erection of 12 semi-detached detached dwellings and associated hard standing and landscaping on the land to the west of the playing fields at Bailey Street in Earby. And I have Annette Brown down to speak. Annette, you've got up to 5 minutes in which to address the committee, and then after that, if any members have any questions, they will ask you to come back in.
Okay,
Annette?
That's fine.
So it's over to yourself, Annette.
Okay. Okay, thank you for allowing me to speak today. As before, my opinion hasn't changed. The land that you're discussing is not suitable for housing, and the drainage plan will not be affected in making it viable. But to avoid covering old ground, I'll just stick to the bigger issues. From your site visit, you'll have seen the Oron ditch to the left of the land, which it is proposed all the surface water will be directed into. This is identified as blocked, goes through third-party land, and is not maintained by any authority. Should this application go ahead, the following items need to be addressed. Work to unblock the drainage channel, responsibility for ongoing maintenance, and access. At present, the developer will not leave any provision for this work, and it will be very costly. Also to note are the collapsed culverts on the site. These have not been identified in any of the development plans, but are a huge issue. Before any development takes place, these need to be corrected. Again, an expensive and complicated undertaking. The plan for foul waste connection to Aspen Grove also needs further investigation. As to do this, developers need to take into account the large suds tank, which is situated underneath Bailey Street, and the culvert which flows under the road. This site is not viable and profitable development plot, and I believe Pendlebury Council will not gain from selling this land off for development. In fact, I think it will end up costing the council more money in the long run. My final point is regard to the possibility of the country cottages site now presents. this brownfield site is ideal for substantial housing development and to which I do not have any objections to. However, with the additional residents this will bring, there's surely a greater need for green space. All this being said, the drainage on the site does need correcting, and it has been a long-standing issue for all the residents that have property lining the land. I would suggest giving the land back to Ely Town Council, whereby they could look to use the land for the benefit. Money could be sought through grants and funds efforts to help correct the drainage, and perhaps local volunteer groups could help transform the area into a woodland area, and maybe even a nature park for the local children. I think this would be a much better use of the land and much more beneficial to the town. So that's all really I have to say on the issue. Obviously, I covered a lot of my other points at the last meeting.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much, Annette, for your contribution. Before I bring councillors in, there was a site visit yesterday arranged by the council where myself, Councillor David Whip, Councillor Mike Goldthorpe and Sarah Coburn-Price attended with Mr Watson. Neil, is there anything that you need to add at this stage, or do you want to listen to the debate first?
Thank you, Chair. No, I think the points that were raised by Ms Brown are covered in the report anyway, so I've nothing really to add further to that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Neil. Okay, I've got Councillor David Whip with his hand up. David?
Thank you, Chairman. As you know, I've been unhappy about the proposed development. I think perhaps the development may be the only way that the improvements that are sought in the drainage can be afforded, but I don't think that it has been satisfactorily resolved. And as Annette said, there is an issue downstream of the site with the blockage in the culvert in third-party land. Now, Neil will tell us that that is not a planning hindrance, but I think it's a practical hindrance, and it's something that needs resolving. Given the nature of this application, I believe that we need to be purer than pure, and I would propose that we refuse the application, firstly on the grounds of inadequate drainage, and secondly, and this encompasses the issue of Spring Mill, which, as we pointed out on site, major, well, up to now, been a commercial operation employing 350 people, but the operators of that business are moving both to home working and moving the headquarters through to Manchester. So I do think that it's premature for us to consider the development of this particular plot in advance of considering those wider issues. Now, I fully accept that in normal circumstances, any developer would probably drive a coach and horses through those arguments. However, I don't think this is necessarily a normal application, in that the council, through its joint venture company Pearl Together, are the applicants, and it is entirely reasonable for the applicant to reconsider the position. Chairman, you know, we could have deferred it for another occasion, but this has been kicking about now for some considerable time, and I think it would be beneficial to draw a line under this and to refuse it at this point. So I'm moving refusal on the basis of inadequate drainage and it being premature given the developments regarding Spring Mill, which is adjacent.
Thanks for that, David. I've got Councillor Mike Goldthorpe. Mike, are you seconding David?
Yes, Chairman, I certainly will. I won't prolong the discussion. I think David and Annette has it well and truly on the spot. now's not the right time if it ever was. There's a lot more things to happen on Bailey Street, no doubt, in the future, and that bit of land will be well looked after, I'm sure, in a different way. So yes, I would fully support and second David's motion.
Okay, thanks for that, Mike. I mean, my contribution is that obviously this application was first registered back in August of last year, way before anybody knew anything about COVID-19 and what was going to happen thereafter. I mean, myself and Councillor Whip, as leader and deputy leader, met with the chief executive of the parent company of Country Cottages, as most of us know, following their decision to move their operation out of Earby. And this site is immediately adjacent to that particular development. And, you know, we've made quite clear to the owners of the mill that we would look to work with them in whatever shape or form to try and address that and not to leave that building derelict or empty over the years to come. So had the application been made and we weren't where we are today, then I, for example, would have been happy to support an approval. But because of the circumstances of where we find ourselves in and looking at the drainage issues that were raised yesterday at the site visit, I'm happy to support the recommendation moved by Councillor Whip. Do I have any other councillors who want to speak? Let me just have a look. Sorry, I've got Neil who's indicated with a hand up. Neil?
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I hear, and I think I predict where the debate's going now, but I'm paid by the council to give you professional planning advice, so that's what I will have to do. Chairman, in terms of the blockage further downstream, this isn't meant to be facetious, but where would that stop? Where would you have to get to in terms of establishing where drainage goes to? Chairman, the planning system works on the basis of riparian owners having responsibility for their own land. So, Chairman, a blockage further downstream, my advice to you is not grounds to refuse an application, because there are ways to deal with that. Chairman, that has also been upheld in a recent appeal where an inspector has made it very clear that the planning system should expect other lawful measures to be used. So, Chairman, I would advise you against that. Chairman, I understand the debate about Country Cottages and Brownfield, but again, Chairman, my advice to you is each application has to be based on what is currently planning policy before you, Chairman. So to be fair on Pearl, who are, I understand we're a partner in there, but they are an independent legal entity. They have a right, obviously, to be heard fairly on the planning merits. So, Chairman, I understand perhaps where the debate's going, but I need to give you that advice.
Okay, Neil, and as usual, we welcome your professional advice and usually take heed. Okay, no other councillors indicating to speak, so I intend to move to the vote. So we have one proposition on the table to refuse the application, which has been moved by Councillor David Whip, seconded by Mike Goldthorpe. I'll read each councillor's name. So if you're for the refusal, if you say for; if you're against refusal, you say against. If you want to abstain, you can abstain. Councillor Nadeem Ahmed.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Musawar Arshad.
For.
Councillor Colin Carter.
For.
Thank you. Councillor David Clegg.
For.
Councillor Sarah Coburn Price.
For.
Councillor Tommy Cooney.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mike Goldthorpe.
For.
Councillor Julie Henderson.
For.
Councillor Mohammed Iqbal. For. Councillor Yasser Iqbal.
For.
Sorry, Yasser, what do you say then?
For.
For. Thank you. Councillor Tom Whip.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Yvonne Tennant.
For.
Thank you. And Councillor David Whip.
For.
Thank you. So that's a unanimous decision. Thank you very much for that, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you to Annette, who's more than welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, but I'm sure you've got better things to do with your evening. Okay.
Or you can just watch it on
I've got a
YouTube.
toddler that's kind of half asleep.
Okay. Thank you very much, Annette. Jane, can I check? Has Rahila Iqbal managed to join us?
Yes, she has. I'll
Okay.
just double check she's still there. You are. Yes, she is.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, the next application, colleagues, is for the change of use of a social club to retail, and that's at the Palatine Working Men's Club, Norfolk Street, Nelson. I have one speaker on this, Rahila Iqbal. Rahila, you've got up to 5 minutes in which to address the committee, and once you've spoken, unless councillors want to ask you a question, you're not permitted to come back into the debate. So if you'd like to unmute yourself and address the committee, please.
First of all, I would like to thank you all for letting me speak in this meeting. I am talking on behalf of my dad. From Ireland, my dad has a very successful business like the one we propose in Ireland, which has helped create many jobs within the community, help the locals by meeting their daily needs and much more. After having 12 years of great experience in this business, which will also lead to a successful business here in Nelson, my dad would also like to move to Nelson in the future, which would allow him to be more helpful in the local community in various ways. My dad has searched the whole of Nelson Town in the last 6 months and seen that there is a desperate need of this kind of business that he has proposed. The application will primarily cater for wholesale, and retail will be a less intensive use than the existing use as our working man club. It will contribute towards strengthening the local economy and will supply and support local businesses. Similar alternative stores are only found outside Pendle. The application seeks effective use of land by reusing a vacant building and making a positive contribution, regeneration in the burg, and assist in the natural growth of the town centre. It should also be noted that the proposal requires extensive floor space to provide a variety of bulk goods which cannot be accommodated within the town centre. The Nelson community will benefit from the store in several ways, as it is a multi-nation food store. The business will be providing different kinds of products that's not available in Nelson or surrounding areas of Nelson. People of Nelson have to specially travel outside of the town to purchase certain products, but after successfully opening the store, people from surrounding areas will travel to Nelson for these products instead. My dad would like to help the community of Nelson by creating jobs for the locals, help them with their daily day-to-day needs for multi-nation worldwide food supply, help the local business in trading as well as selling household products, and loads more online. My dad's business will cater and help many individuals. Therefore, it would be my humble request to Nelson Council Chairman to grant the required permission to open this business in Nelson. We wouldn't like to go against the Nelson Council or against the officers. That's why we have already consulted with Mr. Hassan Datta, and he said there's no big size space available at this time in town centre. My dad has taken advice from many councillors and requested them to help him find a space in town centre big enough for his business, but wasn't able to get that help and support. Therefore, we searched Nelson Town by ourselves with the help of a state agent, and found that this place, which is perfect for our business and situated at the edge of town centre. I would like your help and support to cooperate with us in this successfully opening this business in Nelson. Our first priority is Nelson, but if we can't get a planning permission, then we will be forced to search another town, which will be a big loss for Nelson. Please give me and my business a chance, and I would really appreciate your help and support. Thank you for listening.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Rahila, for your contribution. Before I introduce the debate, Neil, is there anything that you need to add at this stage?
Chairman, you've got an update report that's been circulated. It just looks at another sequential test that's been submitted. Chairman, I understand that the business could be successful, but with due respect, that's not what this is about. This is about whether the development should be located in a town centre, because that's our policy and that's national policy. And our town centres are being hit quite severely. Well, some were in decline, hence why we've got Townsdale, etc. for Nelson, Future High Street Funds for Nelson prior to COVID, and obviously COVID's making things a lot worse. Chair, I have a couple of problems with the sequential test. Firstly, what the national policy is that you have to show flexibility in your approach to how you undertake your retailing. There are units which could be amalgamated together, for example, within Pendle Rise, that haven't been looked at. So there's been no attempt, which you have to do under national policy, to look at a flexible approach. Chairman, secondly, there are sites available, for example, the old bus station, which have not been included in the sequential test. Now, they have been included by Euro garages in their sequential test for a drive-through in Colne, and we know that that site is available on the market and available for development. So, Chairman, my advice is that the sequential test is not adequate. There are other sites, there are flexibilities within this, and if we hollow out our town centres, it's going to make our job of revitalising Nelson in particular a heck of a lot more difficult.
Okay, thanks for that, Neil. I'll open the debate up. I've got Councillor Nadeem Ahmed, who's indicated to speak. Nadeem?
Thank you. This building is a major building, a significant building within the Whitefield ward. Many of you will know this building was very popular in the past, very busy in the past, but unfortunately, for various reasons, it's been lying derelict for the last few years. There's the odd occasion when it's been used for parties and meetings, etc. But over the last, particularly 12 to maybe 24 months, it's hardly been used. I do live close by, and so I am personally aware that the building hasn't been used, other than causing a problem for some residents in terms of antisocial behaviour and other unwanted activities within the car park of the site. And I would suggest that this sort of building cannot be left derelict for much longer. It is already causing issues, and if it's not brought back into use fairly quickly, we're going to have a lot of further issues and problems in that area. I would like to see a new business there, as the speaker has said. It will create employment and much needed employment within Nelson, and I think we should encourage new businesses to locate here and be open for business and try to bring investment into our town, rather than putting obstacles in people's way and making things difficult. So I would argue that we should try and encourage businesses to locate in Nelson, so people and business people are investing the hard-earned cash, especially at these difficult economic times. The more investment we see in our town, the better. But obviously, that shouldn't be at the hindrance of, as Neil touched on, Policy 25 and the Council's policy, which I'll come on to shortly. There have been some responses from the general public, and of course, them concerns they've got the right to raise. They've mentioned in terms of concerns relating to waste storage and storage of vehicles, but that site has, the yard has been cleared. And that's the point I'm trying to make. Rather have a running business, utilising that building, rather than that site being used for things that we don't want to see and which the neighbours and the area is fed up with. He mentions about in terms of noise impacts from comings and goings. If you use that argument, that building can be used for functions and parties, etc. Anyway. So in terms of the current issues which have been raised, they would be there no matter what the use is for that particular building. Concerns regarding potential increases in crime, it's not really, yes, we should listen to them sort of arguments if residents are concerned. I think there's more problems in terms of crime and antisocial behaviour now than what I believe would be if the building was used by these new developers. Existing parking issues in the surrounding areas. Yes, there's parking issues in most areas, but I don't think it's particularly bad in that area. The building does have a fairly decent sized car park, which can be used for the business. So I don't think parking and highways is a significant problem if that building was brought back into use. But obviously the crucial point is in terms of policy 25 and the sequential approach that we have to take. And we heard the arguments, and we had this discussion at Nelson Area Committee, and the lady spoke eloquently and mentioned in terms of there isn't another site. I know Neil touched upon 2 potential sites. Let's look at them. The bus station, there's nothing there. If someone wants to open a business now, we want them to invest. They probably haven't got the financial means to purchase that site, build on it, and then rent it. If someone wants to open now, they probably don't want to open in 2 years' time. They're not going to be waiting around to open. They'll just go elsewhere. In terms of Pendle Rise, this sort of business, I think in terms of the opening hours, Pendle Rise closes at 5 p.m, 5:30. So I don't think that site is suitable in terms of for this type of business. And there isn't. I mean, let's look around in Nelson, this area. There isn't. I can't identify a single site that is suitable for this type of business that they want to do in terms of the size. So I would move that we approve this application for the reasons I've mentioned. Thank you.
Unmute.
Sorry, somebody's put on the chat bar that there's a letter to be read out. It says meetings and planning. Is that you, Neil?
Yes, Chairman.
Okay,
we received it today.
All right. Can I just come back to you in 1 minute?
Can I just
seek if there's a seconder for Councillor Nadeem Ahmed's proposal, and then I'll bring Neil in to read the letter, whatever it says. Sarah, you've got your hand up.
Yes, I'd like to ask the applicant. I was really leaning towards Neil's perspective until Councillor Ahmed pointed out the opening hours. I totally get the whole bus station thing, but I'd like to explore a little bit more that was touched on by the applicant about the uniqueness of this bill, about the uniqueness of this business proposition, because I haven't got a handle on that. That might have come up at Nelson Area Committee. What is it that this business offers that the rest of Nelson doesn't have?
Okay. Rahila, if you can hear that question, can you answer Councillor Coburn-Price's question, please? What's unique about this building? Rahila, if you can hear me, you need to unmute yourself.
Hi. Yes, I would like to tell that the many things which we think there is in Nelson, there is many things that in this town haven't like the many occasion there is many Asian people living and they need many things that is special occasion like weddings and ceremonies that is not in this town, so we will provide that, and many other words, special food like in Ireland there is a special gourmet foods which is in Sligo. I don't know you eat before or not. There is bakery's food that is very special and people like, and we will import that here, and some things we will export to Ireland from here. So in our business in Ireland is also it's benefit from if we open here, we will import and export from outside the words many things. And the timing issue is also, in the Pendle Rise, there is only 5 o'clock and closing time, and we have our opening and closing time is 9 to 9. So it's I don't think so. The Pendle Rise is good for us.
Okay, I assume that wasn't Rahila. That was somebody else from the family.
Actually, my English is not very good. My daughter was speaking
All right,
before
okay.
that.
Sorry,
and,
I just needed to clarify that nobody else had piggybacked onto the meeting. That's fine. Thank you for that. Sarah, does that answer your question?
I'd like to go back to Neil, if I may. I see his hand is up. So that, I think, raises a really important point. This business model seems to be predicated on a 12-hour opening window. What do you have to say about that, Neil, in terms of, it sounds like a great attraction for Nelson Town Centre. I remember you and I were discussing at a tourism conference about attracting more people into Nelson, and I was sort of very much going along this type of theme. What do you say about these particular need for these opening hours that seems to negate Pendle Rise?
And just to add on to that, Neil, can you just clarify the opening hours? I mean, the lady just mentioned 9 till 9, but page 5 of the report talks about 8 till 10. So I'm just wondering what the application says. Whilst you answer Sarah's point, please.
Chairman, the application says 8 till 10.
Right.
So there may be variations within that, but that's what the application, Chairman, says. Chairman, we need to be careful with this. Are we saying that we'll make a planning decision about our town centres, their uses, based on opening hours? Are we saying, and other points in here, that the lady, and I get trying to make a good business, that we can't get bedding sheets and special food when we've got food outlets, furniture shops, etc. within the town centre. You've got to be very clear here. If these are the reasons that we're making decisions on, that will flow across the whole borough. And for example, we now have applications, or an application for a cafe and a drive-through in Colne. Are we shifting the goalposts away from sequential testing into other areas? And if it is that we just want jobs and that's it, then you forget your town centre's policies and you accept as a council that we will go to a laissez-faire without rules approach. You have to be very careful about how you deal with these things here. I'm dropping my H's like my son. So, Chairman, you have to be clear on why, if you're going to depart from these policies, what flows from them. And if you're saying that an empty building, okay, you use that, you've got empty buildings in the town centre, is that a criteria we're going to use? Is it bringing jobs in? Well, Tesco's can bring jobs in. Could they go on Lomiche, for example? If it's a jobs approach, then, and you're setting aside your policies, then we will set our approach here, and every developer will look at how we deal with that. And if it's about what you sell, well, with due respect, you can open up a premises within a town centre and sell bedding and different foods as it exists. Chairman, those to me are very weak reasons to set aside your policies and potentially damage your town centres.
Okay, Sarah, you okay with that? Okay, sorry, Mike, I know you've got your hand up as well, and Yvonne has, and I want to speak. Neil, you said that you had a letter that you wanted to read out. I'm just interested, if you read that letter, I think whether that helps councillors or not, I don't know who's it from or whatever.
Chairman, it's a letter we received today. I'll read it in full. It says, I apologise for writing without disclosing my name, as the pressure being placed on us local residents by the owner of the club is putting us under undue pressure. We as local residents want you to reject this application. The club already causes local people problems whenever they have large events with 500 people with no car parking, causing streets to be clogged up. The proposal for an Asian cash and carry is not something which fits into the locality, and the nuisance cause will not be fair on local people who live nearby. The owner told my family it will be open all hours and serve different foods. High clearly will attract a lot of people in cars. Why isn't the council allowing them to open in the town centre? The club owner, who is a councillor, told my council have told the cash and carry people to open here, as there's nowhere in the town centre. If this is true, then maybe as councillors you need to wake up and walk around the town centre. Do the decent thing and support local residents and reject this silly proposal in its current location. Thank you, Chairman.
That's from somebody that's not giving their name and address, is that right?
They have, but we wouldn't reveal that.
All right,
here.
that's fine. Okay, that's fine.
They have, yes.
Sorry, can I just rewind the clock back a bit? Councillor Dean Mohammed had moved that we approve the application. Mike, were you seconding that, or were you wanting to just speak?
I was proposing to second it, yes, but I would like a couple of questions answered first, if I may.
Yeah, sure.
One's to Neil, and this is about whether this is in fact an application for a retail business or for an wholesale business. According to the document here, it's an application for a retail business. Cash and carry is not a retail business. So there's a bit of confusion there. Could you clarify whether that is in fact what they're applying for?
Chairman, they applied for retail. They have amended it to be a members club, but clearly you've heard today that it will be open to members of the public. So my view is that the intention here, as has been stipulated in the verbal comments here, that it will be a general retail outlet.
Right, okay. So we're looking on this as a retail business on the outskirts, slightly on the outskirts of the centre. Do we know what number of staff are going to be employed in this business?
Neil, can you help us?
No, Chairman, it won't be intense. And Chairman, make it clear, we're not objecting to an operation of a unit there. It's the principle of having it. So it will be not a great deal, a great number of staff.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman. On that basis, I would more than happily support Councillor Nadine's proposal. So I would second that.
Okay. I'll bring other speakers in. I mean, I moved refusal of this at the area committee, and it appeared to be a lone voice there. I mean, I, as colleague will know, that I'm an advocate for bringing jobs into Pendle and argue against Neil every day of the week to try and present a counter argument. But Neil's right, I think, and the fundamental point that we need to remember is that as a council, we're trying our utmost best through the Town Deal Board and the Town Centre initiative to try and get up to £50 million into Nelson to address the decline, certainly in our town centre. And you know, whilst I have every single sympathy for the applicant, I'm not aware of what tests they've done in terms of Policy 25. But you know, Policy 25 previously has been a subjective argument, but in this instance, you know, I endorse what Neil is saying, because if, for example, I'm asked to support this application this evening, much as though I'd like to, I don't think that will send the message out that certainly to the town deal or the town centre people, or certainly to government, that as a council we're really serious about regenerating the town centre. Because, and I've said this at the board meetings previously, that you know, this is a once in a generation opportunity for us to deal with it. And if we continue to give out of town permissions, and I accept that this is just on the edge of the town centre, but the fact is that I can't then hold any argument back to government to say, well, we'd like that £50 million, please, but by the way, and I'll use Neil's analogy, that we'll just give planning permissions wherever willy-nilly. And Neil's right that if, for example, Tesco's turned up at Longshaw Industrial Estate today, you know, clearly they, for example, and any retailer would bring a significant amount of jobs, but is that what we'd want for Longshaw? I don't think it is that is what we would want. So I think uniquely going to support the officer recommendation on this one, and would urge colleagues to really think about the future viability of Nelson as a town. I'm a Nelson resident, a Nelson councillor. You know, I want more jobs coming to Nelson, but is this the right place? You know, I'd much rather somehow that there was some effort put in through their agents to try and relocate in the town centre, because I think this type of operation would really work for the town centre in terms of bringing that footfall, in terms of bringing people from outside. More than welcome that, but you know, I need to think of the town centre this evening, and for that reason I can't support this. So I'll move a counter proposal that we go with the officer recommendation and look for a seconder for that.
I'll second that.
Who's that? Yvonne? Thank you. Do you want to speak as well now, Yvonne, or?
Yeah, I mean, the one was a question which is the same as what Councillor Goldthorpe said, really. What you know, is it retail or is it wholesale, which was confusing, to say the least. The other thing is, much as I love the idea of this business, and I think it would be really welcome in Nelson Town Centre, in terms of the traffic, I completely disagree with Councillor Ahmed There's a garage at one end of the street. It's primarily a residential street. There's a garage at one end of the street. There's two garages at the other end of the street. It's a very, very narrow street. There's quite often pickup trucks and other sort of vehicles associated with those parked on the street, which makes it even narrower. I mean, I've lost count. I live fairly close to it, albeit, not quite as close as Councillor Ahmed, but close. And the number of times we've had to drive around the block because cars have just been double parked on the road, and you can't get past. It will only make it worse if this goes ahead. So I can see why the residents on that street are particularly concerned about it. So I would vote to reject it.
Okay, thanks, Yvonne. Councillor David Whip.
Thank you, Chairman. This isn't just about a planning application outside Nelson Town Centre. And I mean, I think Norfolk Street is clearly outside the town centre. There is a natural barrier between the town centre and Norfolk Street, and there's only a couple of bridges that you can cross to get over. So, looking at the implications for elsewhere in Pendle, if this is approved and then we get unfortunate applications from who knows who it might be for other out of centre locations in other townships, this will be quoted as a precedent and as an example which will be used to beat us about the head with. And I think we have to be consistent. I think we have to be careful, and in this application, we need to think beyond the implications in Nelson, but think about Colne, think about Van Alswick, Earby, and the like, and get the right decision. It may be that because of the changing nature of retail, because of the impact of COVID-19, there are all sorts of policy implications, but we ought to think through what those policy implications are, and we ought to develop new policies to adapt to circumstances, not make bad policy on the hoof by approving an application which seems to have some support in some circles, but hopefully not by a majority. One of the things, and I sit on the Nelson Town Deal Board, I'm not a Nelson councillor clearly, but I do have wider responsibilities across the borough. And one of the things that I have celebrated on that Nelson Town Deal Board is the vibrancy of Nelson when it comes to the bazaars, which, the bazaar is a regional destination, and that is in the town centre. So we ought to be building on that, not dispersing things across the length and breadth of Nelson and dissipating all that critical mass that we could create by having like-minded businesses and businesses that fit together and create that critical mass that then has enough gravity to draw even more people in spending money. There are opportunities in the middle of Nelson. There are plenty of opportunities, and it would be wrong to approve something which would take away, detract, and also end up with us creating a policy by default which would then harm other town centres in Pendle. So I support the proposal to refuse.
Okay, thanks, David. Mike, you got a hand up. Is it an old hand or a new hand? I take it's an old hand, the way that you waved at me then. Okay. Is there any other councillors that wish to speak? So just bear with me. Both Yvonne and Nadeem, you've got your hands up as well. Are they old hands as well?
Mine's an old one. I'll take it down.
I've just put mine up again, Iqbal, if that's okay.
All right. Okay. Nadeem, yeah.
Yeah, just a quick question to Neil before I say a few words. Neil, in terms of the sequential process, you haven't really commented on that. Has a report been submitted by the applicants? My understanding is some detailed report or paperwork has been provided.
Through you, Chairman, apologies if I didn't make it clear. We have one, but I think it's deficient, both in terms of some of the analysis, because it talks about financial issues, but has no information around that. And particularly misses, for example, the bus station and the point that you have to look at in sequential testing, which is flexibility within the format that you've got, and that is in the requirements of the National Planning Policy Guidance that you have to look at flexibility. So we have one, but in my view, it is not a good one.
Thanks, Neil. I think in terms of the report, from what I've seen, I think it was to be fair, a very detailed sequential report. I've seen other reports in the past by certain applicants, nowhere near as detailed as this one. I might not agree with some of the contents of it, but it was. I was quite impressed with the detail and the effort that had gone into it. I think in terms of the reason they're choosing this particular building, I know we've touched upon, is it because of the hours? Is it because of what they sell? I don't think that's the point. I think the point is we keep talking about this is policy off the hoof and we're just making a decision. We're not. This is an edge of town building, a significant building in Nelson, where there is a potential to bring that building back into use, bring it back into life. And the main point is that there isn't another building. We keep mentioning the bus station, we mentioned the premises within Pendle Rise. They're not appropriate, I'm sorry. There isn't premises within our town centre of buildings of this nature, of this stature, this size, for what the applicants are proposing. There isn't that at all. Just touching on in terms of, is it retail, is it cash and carry? I think I know we're trying to make it sound like it's all retail. It's not. From the applicants, from what we've heard at area committee and this evening, it's a bit of both. There is retail. I don't think the main part of it is going to be retail. From the applicants themselves, when they've spoken, this emphasis seems to be on the cash and carry side rather than the retail. I'm not saying there might not be any retail, but there is predominantly the cash and carry side of it. Just touching on in terms of, is this going to set a precedent? I don't think it is, because each application has to be judged on its own merits. We are judging this particular application on its own merits in terms of the sequential approach. Other areas, Corn and West Craven, they couldn't rely on this, say, oh, well, you approved it in Nelson, so you have to grant us permission. That's not the case. The applicants in this instance have gone through the whole process. They can't find another suitable site within the town centre. I'll challenge people to tell me where it is, and I'll vote against the applicant. There isn't. We mentioned the bus station. There's nothing there. There isn't. The Pendle Rise. Who's going to go there and pay? And I know financial implication is not part of the discussion, but in terms of the hours the Pendle Rise is opened, it's not suitable for the hours these applicants want to open. Number one. Number two, there isn't the size. You can join up 2 or 3 units in there. It still won't be the size of this building. And thirdly, who's going to go in there and pay the huge rents and the service charges? Nobody in the real world. Sorry, so I'm going to be sticking with my motion to approve. Thanks.
Okay, thanks for that, Nadeem. I mean, I'll just make one comment. I'm surprised. I mean, Neil will correct me if I'm wrong, but money doesn't come into the equation in terms of policy 25. But I'm surprised that you're choosing to knock Pendle Rise Centre in terms of saying the rents are extravagant and service charges. We should be looking to promote the town centre, but clearly you made your views known. So I'm going to proceed to the vote. There's 2 propositions on the table, so I'm just going to deal with them as one. So if you're for the application, you say for. If you're against it, against, and if you want to abstain, abstain. So we're all clear. So if you're for, if you're against, against. If you want to abstain, abstain. Councillor Nadeem Ahmed.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mustafa Arshad.
For.
Councillor Colin Carter.
For.
Councillor David Clegg,
Against.
Councillor Sarah Coburn Price,
Against.
Councillor Tommy Cooney,
For.
Councillor Mike Goldthorpe,
For.
Councillor Julie Henderson,
Against.
Councillor Mohammed Iqbal, against, Councillor Yasser Iqbal,
Against.
Councillor Tom Whip,
Against.
Councillor Yvonne Tennant,
Against.
Councillor David Whip.
Against.
Okay, so Jane, I get that 5 in favour of the application and 8 against.
Yes, that's right, Chairman.
That's fine. So the application is refused on the reasons set out. Okay, the next item is the Treasury Management Outturn for 2019-20. Before I introduce that, can I place on record my personal appreciation and on behalf of, I think, all the council to Vince Green. Vince, some of you will recollect, tried to escape from the council a while ago. Did escape, but we managed to persuade him via Dean, who's having a well-earned break this week, to come back and help the council and the people of Pendle over the last 6 months. And what I want to do is place on record for the minutes that the council thanks, certainly this committee thanks Vince for his services. I wish he could stay on a bit longer, but respect his and Mrs. Green's wishes, more so Mrs. Green's wishes, but wish Vince all the happy retirement for however short period it might be, and hopefully we can persuade him to come back again if and when Pendle needs Vince. But I'm sure everybody will join me in thanking Vince for his services. I'll move on to Treasury Management Outturn. Councillor David Whip.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I want to start by also thanking Vince and all the work he's done in the last few months. It's been a very hard slog, and Vince has been a key player in making sure that Pendle Council could continue to operate in a fit and proper fashion. And I have appreciated enormously Vince's capable hands in dealing with the finances. Obviously, earlier in the year, we decided that we'd give Dean Langton the heavy lifting to do in terms of finances, and just as soon as we'd done that, we were hit by COVID-19, hit by the epidemic, and it became obvious that it was untenable for Dean to take on all that extra work in terms of COVID-19 and be able to do all the finance stuff at once. There's been an enormous amount of work done, and I don't think a lot of people will have seen this necessarily, but in terms of the millions of pounds of grants that have been dispersed to businesses, the changes that have been brought about in terms of council tax payments and the relief that people have got. And Vince has been behind all of that. And I would add my personal appreciation to all that he's done and endorse everything that you said, Chairman, and wish Vince the very best for a break. And I do appreciate that he's actually stopped on an extra day so as to cover this meeting. And I apologise to him because I actually pointed out that we wouldn't have a top finance person available this meeting, and I think Dean said, well, could he just work an extra day to cover this meeting? So I think it's important to recognise all that is done. In terms of Treasury management, I think this is an example, and this is where Craig Finn, the head of accountancy, has done an excellent job and continues to do an excellent job. And our appreciation to Craig and all the team who have kept Pendle Council ticking over in financial terms. I'm not going to go into the libid rates and all that sort of stuff. I would move that we accept the report, and I'm sure if there are any questions, Vince is still here to answer them.
I'm happy to second that. Vince, sorry, I didn't realise you were joining us by working secretary. Is there anything that we need to be aware of on this treasury management, or are we awash with money whilst Dean's away to spend?
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, members. And firstly, if I may just say thank you very much for your kind words. They really mean a lot to me, but I would also like to stress that it is very much a team effort, and you've got some excellent people working for you at the council, and it's been a pleasure to work with colleagues again through this difficult time. And I think how you and they have sustained services, etc., throughout this time has been tremendous. But thank you very much for those kind words. But I also like to recognise the efforts of all of my colleagues. In terms of Treasury, no, there isn't much that I really want to add to the report. You've seen aspects of this in terms of the revenue outturn, the capital outturn, etc. Perhaps just to make sure that councillors have seen the information at the bottom of page 9 of the appendix, top of page 10, where it does highlight that we had a technical breach of the limit that we could have on deposit with our bankers, Lloyds, just for 2 days at the end of March, due to the advance funding payments made to the council in support of COVID measures. We had a breach. Details were reported to the Accounts and Audit Committee. That breach carried on into this financial year because of the significant grant funding that the council received. And I just wanted to make sure, that has been acknowledged in terms of the information in the report you have. But apart from that, Chairman, I'm just happy to take any questions.
Okay, thanks a lot for that, Vince. Nadeem, you had your hand up.
Yeah, can I just echo what you and yourself and Councillor Whip have said in terms of the efforts of Vince and the whole team, as Vince has diplomatically said. I think Vince been absolutely fantastic. I mean, I've emailed Vince in the evenings, early morning, and Vince has always been fantastic in terms of the responses that he gives and how quickly he's done. So wish Vince all the very best for the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Nadeem. There's no other questions from council. Is everybody happy to note the report? I'm getting a nod in the heads. Yeah, thank you very much. Moving on to the business recovery plan. Vince, is this you again?
No, it's me.
It's Philip. Sorry.
Yeah.
Philip.
This is an update of the report which came to the committee a couple of months ago. We promised then that we would do regular updates of it. It's obviously very detailed, and I'm very happy to answer any questions on it. I would just add that it is with the papers for the council meeting next week as part of the leaders' report on the work of the Policy and Resources Committee.
Thanks, Philip. David?
Thank you, Chairman. I do think it's important that all councillors look carefully through this report and appreciate some of the implications of what is happening, what has happened, and what will happen in the future. I'm not proposing to go into it in any particular detail at the moment, but I did want to say that Pendle Council is very much still in response mode in terms of the epidemic. Although we have improved the situation through targeted testing, some tracing and isolation, we have seen an upsurge recently, and obviously neighbouring boroughs, which may not have been as assiduous as we have been in trying to keep a lid on all of this, have seen an enormous upsurge in the number of reported cases, to the extent that any relaxation of the rules in Pendle is now jeopardised by the rates of infection in neighbouring boroughs. So we are still in a response mode, and it's clear that we're in this for the long haul, and moving to a recovery position where we try and rebuild is possibly a long way off, and we've got a very hard winter ahead of us. So my advice to all council colleagues is to brace yourself for the storms ahead and to prepare to see normality not on the horizon, but beyond the current horizon. And it's very difficult. And as someone who has, for the last 2 months particularly, has thrown themselves into the fight against COVID-19, I thought we had half a chance of getting on top of this before the autumn and before the winter, and those hopes have been dashed. We've seen the collapse of the national testing programme. We don't have an effective end-to-end case and contact tracing system that operated locally. We've got this disjointed model between the national system and the local team, and we don't have any effective tools to ensure self-isolation. And the one thing that we did win was a financial compensation scheme that really isn't worth the money that it isn't worth the paper that it's written on. So I think we do need to be optimistic for the future, but I think we need to be realistic. And realism, I hope, is what every councillor now appreciates is the name of the game. And we cannot manage this pandemic with populism. We need to have the support of citizens of Pendle, and I hope that in Pendle, if nowhere beyond, that we can maintain that support for what's needing to be done to ensure that the virus doesn't spread any further, and that we don't see more and more people suffering ill health because of its effects. Thank you, Chairman. I'll move the report.
Fine. I'm happy to second that. Is there any other speaker? Just bear with me. No. Happy to note that report. Thank you very much, colleagues. Thank you, Vince, once again. Moving on to item 7, tackling contamination and recycling bins. Philip, is this your baby as well?
This is mine again, yes. I think the report succinctly sets out what the problem is. It's a problem that we've had for quite a long time, and we've not really been able to shift it or make much improvement on it. It's a particular problem in Pendle, but it's also a problem county-wide, and that's why the county have come up with some money to sort of try and make some progress with it. And as you see, that's been used to employ a temporary officer to take it forward. I think you'll see at the end of the report that the emphasis to start off with is on education and explanation to householders about what they need to do to avoid this contamination. And that's the nature of the approach. But if that doesn't work in individual cases, then clearly enforcement will be required against them. But the initial approach is very definitely on education and explanation.
Okay, thanks, Alex. Councillor David Clegg, is there anything you need to add on this, or we're happy to note it?
Well, there isn't a right lot you can say, Chairman, other than it is a problem, and as Philip's already outlined, I won't say Pendle's the worst in Lancashire, but it's not far off the worst. We keep fluctuating from being worst to possibly next to the worst. But the problem is with it, which is what I've said at several of the Waste Partnership meetings, is unless you put a lot of money into it and start investigating what's in the bins before they're emptied, you've actually missed the boat. Because by the time the bin crew have emptied the bin, you can't identify where it's come from, because by the time they empty the truck, they've done several streets. So where did they pick it up? They don't know. So unless you put a lot of money in to inspect some of the bins before they're emptied, you're flogging a dead horse. And I think Philip's right. The way forward, and it's probably the only way, is to educate people not to put the wrong stuff in.
Okay, thanks for that, David. Nadeem?
Yeah, just a quick point. I agree with in terms of the education side of it. The difficulties obviously are with, because due to COVID-19, officers can't go out and actually speak to people. I think that's the problem. I'm not sure how effective doing more letters and photographs, etc., is going to be. But I don't think at this moment in time we haven't got a choice really. That's the difficulty. But I suppose we have to do that than do nothing and hope it works.
Okay, thanks for that. Okay, colleagues, thank you very much. Moving on to changes to the planning system. Neil, are you still with us?
I am awake, Chairman, yes.
All right, I thought you might have left us by now, when we got to national planning reforms. You want to talk to us about this brief report?
Chairman, I'll just highlight a couple of points because I know you'll have all read it in detail. Chairman, first thing is the changes to the use classes. A new use class has been created, Class E, which incorporates the retail, the financial services and the cafes, etc., into B1 use into a new Class E. Chairman, that will mean that effectively a change on an industrial estate of a light industrial building to retail would no longer be development. So that, I think, is a major issue we've got there. How that will affect us, I'm not clear yet, but that's a major change. Pubs, wine bars, etc., are now what's called sui generis, so a use on their own, so they can't change to anything else without planning permission. Chairman, the odd thing for this is that the existing use classes are meant to count for decision making until July next year, which is a quite strange thing. So, for example, if we had an application to change an A3 to an A1 use in a protected retail frontage, it might be refusal, but yet it's not development as of next year. So I'm not quite clear how that implication will play out. But Chairman, we're recommending that all area committees are informed of this. It's now law, so it's effectively a piece of information for them.
All right.
Chairman, the second.
Sorry, go on. Go on, Neil.
Just briefly, the second one are proposed planning reforms. One is to the standard methodology, and that basically is to put a ceiling in that because what we get now is widely varying population projections. It can go up and down by 8,000 in 2-year changes, which is, to be honest, it's quite ridiculous, and it doesn't give you confidence in how the methodology is put together. But in future, they're proposing that there will be a ceiling of 0.5% of your housing stock, so you're not likely to get huge variations, which to me, Chairman, seems a more sensible way of approaching it. Chairman, for me, though, with this is we have a standard methodology, and it's not clear in planning policy whether you can stick with that figure because that's the standard figure, or you have to add in everything else, different projections and employment projections, etc. within that. When the Home Secretary, I think he was, Mr. Javed, proposed this in the white paper, it was meant to be a fixed position, and I think we haven't got clarity on that. So my view, Chairman, is we will go back to government to say, let's have some clarity actually in policy, please, on how we can use this. The other major thing, I think, Chairman, you might want to debate, if you don't want to debate anything else, is the permission in principle. That is proposed to be introduced for now major housing schemes. So whereas it was limited to up to 10 units, maximum of 10 in the current proposals, it can go up to 150 units now. So you could find a planning application, and all we would get is a plan of the area, a form and a fee, and you will be limited in what a community could object to on that proposal, which, to my mind, Chairman, for major schemes of that, there are all kinds of issues which should be debated, I think, at the outset. So my recommendation would be that as a council we object to that. So the other thing is there's a 5-week limit instead of 13 weeks for those, so they will be rushed through. Chairman, those I think are the main highlights I would say of the reforms. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Neil. I've got Councillor David Whip and Sarah Coburn-Price. So, David.
Thank you, Chairman. I wanted to speak about the permission in principle, and I think that is really taking away the ability of residents to seek to influence decisions, and the absence of any useful information in terms of what the impact would be, where the access would be, how things would appear. I mean, we've been on this slippery slope now for a while, where you get outline applications with not a lot of information apart from where the access would be, and then you get the detail and really struggling if the principle has been accepted to do much about it. And this is even worse. And I mean, I understand, the aim of the government is to increase house building, but in a place like Pendle, is this going to make a blind bit of difference? Because it's not planning approvals that is the brake on development, it's the marketability of the properties that are then developed, and how many planning permissions are there in place that haven't been taken up. It's hundreds and hundreds. So we're getting a double whammy here, because we've got the housing delivery test biting us in the backside because people haven't built houses, and then the government are saying, well, because built houses aren't being built, you've got to give more and more permissions. And here you're giving permissions in principle without knowing nothing about the particulars of any particular case. So we're on a dangerous road, and I think the government are bending over backwards to appease developers or please developers, and it's the wrong thing. It's the wrong thing for Pendle. I mean, I don't think it's a good thing for the rest of the country, but it's particularly inappropriate here, and we should be fighting as hard as we possibly can.
David, you've muted yourself.
I appreciate that our MP is a government minister, and he cannot speak in Parliament about these things. But I do think, in addition to the recommendations that we've got, that we do seek to get the MP for Pendle to lobby within government to ensure that we don't have an inappropriate set of rules that will do people in Pendle no favours whatsoever. So I would move the rest of the report with that additional proposal at the end, please.
I'm happy to second that. Sarah?
I understand and share Neil's frustration over the varying population calculations and the apparent ambiguity of the target, because at least if we knew we had a firm target, that would be something to aim for. I agree with Councillor Whip over the sort of egregious use of the 20% buffer for housing delivery, when there's absolutely nothing that any of us councillors can do about it. And that, of course, leads to us to fail on our 5-year housing land supply. The permission in principle worries me a great deal. I have written to and spoken to Andrew Stevenson about this, and he tells me that he has already spoken on a couple of occasions to the planning minister, and we are hopeful for some level of northern exception for areas of low viability. Otherwise, we fear that we would have a greenfield first policy by accident, and we certainly do want to avoid that. I think it's very important that we listen to residents How many of us here have changed our minds in the room when we've heard what the residents have had to say? And I would say it was all of us. You can read things, you can look at things, you can even stand on the site, but listening to the residents and allowing the residents to have their say is so very, very important. I would like, if possible, for you to add something to your letter. It struck me, reading the report and then reading your letter, that something is worth pointing out about Pendle, which is that first homes, the government appears to believe that first homes are in some of these homes that are being built. Whereas we all know, real world, that if you were to buy a first home in Pendle, you would buy an old house. You'd buy a little terraced house because they are the best value and the most amount of space for your money. And it's worth pointing out that in Pendle, the buildings that we have, the ones that are standing, are nearly always worth less than the replacement building price. So, you know, you could own a house that's perhaps worth £80,000, but it would cost 150,000 or 120,000 to build it again. And I think that's unusual, and it shows the low land value that Pendle has. And I think that sort of undermines some of the assumption that the government's making. And then I'm just looking at page 5, talking about really the things that could happen in terms of demolitions and so forth. I think this underlines, and again, I am sympathetic because I know we only have a part-time conservation officer, but I wonder whether we ought really to be thinking when we're budgeting about putting some more money into special project, making some more conservation areas. The last conservation areas were made in the late 1990s, and we all know from listed buildings and conservation areas that things can be reassessed again, times change. And I was the person who didn't step back fast enough when the neighbourhood plan for Colne was saying who should do the Colne list. So I was hoping it would be a Colner, but it ended up being me. And as I was sort of going around the town, I found 4 areas that really were untouched and real character areas. I've written to Rosemary Lyons about these. She agrees with me. She says these are character areas. Perhaps if there was the funding, I've written about them. It's not good enough to be a conservation area. It's not as good as a conservation area character appraisal. But I have identified them, and I'm sure other towns must be the same, that there are these areas that could be considered to be conservation areas. And I just fear that the stumbling block for them becoming conservation areas isn't their merit, but it is actually the cost of putting together an appraisal.
Thanks, Sarah. I think if budgets don't permit, I think we have a volunteer conservation officer in the making. Neil, are you happy to add that into the letter in terms of the points that Sarah's just raised about the house prices, affordability and rebuild?
Yes, Chairman.
Okay, thanks. Mike, I've got you next. You're on mute, Mike.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll keep it brief because I think a lot of what I was thinking about has already been said. But I think we've got unanimity, if I can say the word. David Whip made it quite clear about the issues. I think it's going to be bad for Pendle, but it's going to be a disaster for West Craven for all the reasons we know. So all I can say is we do have tin hats in the West Craven Area Committee, and we will continue to use them, I think. So I fully support what David has said. Neil's was good, and Sarah finished it off at the end. So there's a lot to be said about this, and I think we need to make our point. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks, Mike. And we have a guest this evening, Councillor Tony Greaves.
Well, Chair, thank you. Can you hear me?
Well, I can indeed.
Right. I wasn't actually going to say anything, but I was provoked to say something by Councillor Coburn-Price just now. Positively, I think. However, before I do that, yeah, it'll be a disaster for all these reasons if we're not careful. It will also be a disaster for the Conservative Party because they'll get blamed for it all. So I do say to the Conservative councillors here who are we're all on the same side on this issue, you've got a lot more clout in your party and MPs and so on than the rest of us. So, I mean, some of us are privileged. You see where I am at the moment. I'm in my little cubbyhole in London. I'm privileged to be able to stand up and say things. I can't force people to listen. And at the moment, we have a government which is not in listening mode. In a year or two, it will be, because all governments mellow in this way. So I just say that. We're relying on you. I agree with Councillor Coburn-Price that we ought to have we ought to have a review of the conservation areas in Pendle, really. I don't know if that could come in part 2 of the local plan, or if it's a different, separate thing altogether. It was Richard Kirby who initially set up or persuaded us to set up a lot of the conservation areas. And I should declare an interest, because I live in 2 conservation areas. There's Winewall and Cotton Tree is in the Winewall and Cotton Tree Conservation Area. It's also in the Trawden Forest wider conservation area. But I'm sure there are other places. What I would like us to do as well, when we've all got a bit of spare time, I've asked about this before in various places and I don't get satisfactory answers, but there has been a review of National Park and AONB boundaries, and I don't know if it's too late or whether you can do it anyway. I think the AONB areas in Pendle should be extended. When they were first made, when the Forest of Bowland AONB was made and included Pendle Hill and Pendleside, a lot of the rest of Pendle was thought to be a sort of down at heel, declining, pretty derelict sort of area. And why on earth is, for example, Bullsworth Hill and all that amazing countryside in the Trawden Wycoller valleys and the land going up towards the border with Yorkshire, up Skipton Old Road and so on, for example, why is that not AONB? Why is Wheats Hill not AONB? I ask these questions. I think that attitudes to these areas have changed, and also, in a sense, the areas have changed. The areas haven't changed, I suppose, very much, but the regard of them has changed. They're not broken down grotty areas anymore. They are fantastic countryside. We're on the edge of the Yorkshire Dales. We're on the edge of the Forest of Bowland, and I think that we ought to be having a look at whether quite a bit of that ought not to be AONB, because at the moment most of the area I'm talking about would not be considered for housing development, but in 30-40 years, who knows, the world might have changed. So I just put that forward as a suggestion, and I will mute myself now and go away. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Tony. Neil's been making notes. Neil, is there anything that you need to respond on before we proceed?
No, Chairman.
Okay, thanks, Neil. Thank everybody for their contributions, but I'll give the last word to our voluntary conservation officer, Sarah.
I'd love to be a conservation officer. It would be my dream job, but I'm sure I can't be a councillor and be employed by the council. I was going to ask
I'm
Neil...
just giving you a hint there then.
Oh, okay. I'll choose. I might not get the job. I was going to ask Neil a question, but he's on the phone. Right. Is there a possibility that our AONB could be extended? I call my ward beautiful Bullsworth. I hope that's not self-aggrandizement. It really is gorgeous. I didn't know that that was a review that was even possible.
Through you, Chairman. Apologies, my son's calling me. So I think the AONBs are, if I'm right, I may be wrong, and the council agrees, may tell me I'm wrong. I think they're done under an Act of Parliament, so I suspect that there's a wider bit of legislation to go through. But if I'm absolutely honest, I've never looked at it, so I'm happy to do so. But my gut feeling will be like with the national parks, it's set up under an Act of Parliament.
Tony, can you help us with that? I'll give you a chance to know. All right, that's fine. Okay, so with the additional recommendation from Councillor Whip, everybody's happy? Yeah, thank you very much. We move then on to tree planting on council-owned land, and I know Councillor Tom Whip wanted to speak on this. Tom?
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
So first of all, I'd like to thank Mr. Johnson for putting this report together. It's got some good work to allocate some sites there. I would like to point out that no areas of land were found in the West Craven Area Committee area. I think this is very unfortunate. I think we should be trying to plant as many trees throughout the entire borough. And I think the way that Pendle Council can do that is to assist town councils as well as parish councils in finding funding for tree planting and in carrying out these schemes. I think they're a major part to play in Pendle's role, and we should be affording as much assistance as we can. That's all from me.
Okay, cheers, Tom. Councillor Mike Goldthorpe, and then I've got Councillor Tony Greaves.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to, say the same thing as Tom has said there, really. We've got West Craven, which is surrounded by fields and the odd coppice and the edges of woods and everything, but we've got nothing at all in West Craven identified. And we do know that Pendle Borough does own land in West Craven in a number of places. Some of it is grazing land at the moment. Some of it's been a disputed planning application, perhaps called Bailey Street. But I'm disappointed that we can't find somewhere that we could plant a few trees in West Craven. I'm sure if we got our sort of act together, we could find some places. There's the odd scrap of land round Earby that Pendle Borough own, and I'm not talking about back of Aspen Grove or somewhere like that, but there are smaller fields and grazing plots that would take trees and would help, of course, in the flood defences of Earby. If we've got these trees soaking up the 40,000 gallons a mature tree can do in its yearly cycle. So yeah, I think we need to. It's something that hasn't come to be discussed at the West Craven Area Committee, but I do support this 100%. There is places we can use. We should find them in West Craven, and I think it's to be commended. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Tony.
Sorry. Sorry, I knew there was something I had to say. This went to some of it anyway, went to the Climate Change Working Group, Climate Emergency Working Group, and we said there, we promised them that we'd sent copies of this report for comment to all the co-opted members who were not councillors, who otherwise wouldn't get it. So can that be done, please? I understand it's going to area committees and parish councils. Is that right? Yeah, well, I got some other comments in Combe, but I'll wait until the Combe committee. Thank you. Well, can it be sent to our members, please? Thank you.
James made a note of that. Sarah?
I often talk to Lee on trees. He is a fund of knowledge. He found an enormous elm that I'd been ignoring right outside the front of my house only earlier this week. This report is an excellent report. It's so encouraging to see so much planting in Colne. I was going to ask, and I'm guessing that Councillor Greaves was going to ask, a very specific question about King George V playing fields and exactly where those trees would be on that piece of land. But perhaps he's right, we're best off waiting until it comes to Colne Area Committee. But I'm presuming that there'll be sort of follow-up reports on looking at other pieces of sort of public land. Lee's expertise would help parish councils and probably LCC as well. And that would give us an opportunity to get an awful lot more trees in Pendle. And it could be that rather like we have a call for sites for housing land, we could have a call for trees for private landowners. I have mentioned this to a couple of landowners, and they say that they would be very keen to submit some land for tree planting. So that's another thing that potentially the council could do.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. Councillor David Whip.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to draw attention to two things. First of all, the Marlfield Farm at Earby is a pilot project which is funded through the Leeds Flood Alleviation Scheme, and we are promoting tree planting as part of natural flood defences in and around Earby. And if there are any landowners who would be willing up on the hillside there to take part in that natural flood management, they would be very welcome to get in touch. And this is a significant project. The second thing is, in terms of Councillor Tom Whip, he was saying about working with town and parish councils, and of course the reason why there isn't very much land left in West Craven owned by Pendle Council is that it's mostly been given to the respective town councils in Earby and Barnoldswick. So working closely with the town councils is key to getting the tree cover improved. And I would just point out that Councillor Tom Whip has not been idle, because he's ordered 400 and odd trees, which is expecting his dad and some other volunteers to start planting in November. And that's just part of a wider project that Barnoldswick Town Council is doing. And Chairman, I've just been reminded actually that we've got the Ribble Rivers Trust project underway as well, and again that's another string to our bow. It's one that will see a significant increase in tree cover, and it is referred to in the report that we need to work very closely with the Ribble Rivers Trust in the tree planting that we're going forward with. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I don't see any other speakers. Neil, can you convey to Lee the positive manner in which the report was received and commend him for that, please? The recommendations.
Sorry, I had my hand up, Chair. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, Nadine.
Yeah. And I never thought I'd be interested in trees, but I am actually. I've really been fascinated by some of the comments by colleagues. But just this is a Lancashire-wide thing. I'm just interested to know. In terms of other local authorities, presumably they're doing a similar sort of thing. Do we know how far they've got in terms of their policies? And because us doing this sort of thing on our own, I know it's good, but I think it needs a more wide effort. And the report does refer to the whole of Lancashire. So that's the first point. I just need an answer, or someone can help. And secondly, on paragraph number 7, it says some sites may be controversial with residents and may require some communication works prior to planting. I think it shouldn't say may. I think that we must consult with the public.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you able to give us an update where other districts are across Lancashire? I mean, I've not picked anything, but where people are ahead of us.
Chairman, Lee's been involved in the discussions with other councils, etc. I think probably the best thing for me to do, because I don't know, if I'm honest, exactly where they are, is do a note round to members of the committee, just outlining where we think other boroughs are.
Okay. David, is that a new hand?
Yes, it is. And just to come in about the Woodland Connect scheme, which I referred to, which is the ambitious plan for a programme of tree planting, largely on the the banks of the Ribble and its tributaries. But the scale of the programme is very ambitious indeed. I do know that of the local authorities who promised to contribute funding, that Pendle are in the vanguard with the support. I'm not sure if anybody else has actually tipped any funding up, but I did facilitate Vince sorting a check out, and we are well on with that. And Councillor Greaves and Councillor Tom Whip have been involved with that programme as well. So we are pushing on several fronts in terms of accelerating tree planting, and I can't comment about other local authorities. I think, you know, as Pendle Council, we need to concentrate on what we're doing. One thing that it has prompted me to suggest is perhaps that we look to the county council as well, and that perhaps we should incorporate that in the resolution to see whether the county council would embrace the same attitude as we are doing. And I am aware of various plots of land that they have, and some of the school sites perhaps may be appropriate as well. So I think there's plenty of scope there. So perhaps add a further resolution in terms of getting the county council on board and working with them as partners to expand the planting programme.
Jane, if you can add a note to that we write to the county council to seek a virtual meeting at some point in the near future to discuss this particular proposition, please. I've now got Councillor Yvonne Tennant who wants to speak. Yvonne?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Councillor David Whip said about speaking to Lancashire County Council about it. But in terms of other local authorities and where they are, I don't really think it's relevant if they're not as far ahead in it as us, because I would really like to see Pendle leading as an example on this.
Cheers, Yvonne. Tony, you've got your hand up. Is it a new hand, or are you still waving at us with an old hand?
Well, it's a very old hand, but as old as the rest of me, apart from my teeth, which are falling out, which are not quite as old. The two things, the working group resolved to contact the county council to ask them to talk to us about land they've got, so that can be put together with that. The other thing is the Northern Forest. We led the Lancashire complaints that Lancashire had been missed out of the whole Northern Forest scheme, which is a vast scheme from Liverpool to Hull. Obviously not to plant trees everywhere, but a broad forest scheme like the one they've got in the Midlands. And they have agreed that Lancashire is now part of the Northern Forest. I think the Woodland Trust and the Ribble Rivers Trust got together and sorted that out. So I think there will be schemes and resources from that in the future, not immediately. But the Ribble Rivers Trust is the work they're doing now is part and parcel of the Northern Forest, so that's good.
Okay, thank you for that, colleagues. Moving on to item 10, land adjacent to 1 Kirby Road. Request in terms of the long lease. I'll move that we support that. Everybody happy? Yeah, nodding of heads, thank you. Moving on to the annual emissions report. It's there for approval and to be put onto the council's website. Sarah?
Sorry. On the last page, the penultimate point, it's all the things that haven't been included. And I can sort of see why they haven't been included. It could be the maths, it could be the time taken to calculate it. But I was sort of thinking, I wonder whether you're kicking yourselves that you didn't include some of it, because unwittingly, owing to COVID-19, we might have been doing really well. So in terms of not commuting and things like that, home working. I can see that actually, if you did all of them on this list, it would be somebody's full-time job just to do all the calculations, and that would be perhaps self-defeating. But I wonder whether some of these points might be things that we'd want to monitor in the years to come, because we are changing how we're working.
Yeah, I think this report's up to the 31st of March this year, so just a week into lockdown. But you make a valid point, and that can be relayed back to Jill for this year's report that we'll get next year, hopefully. Okay, thank you. Item 12 is tenders, just for noting. And then item 13 is a matter referred from West Craven Area Committee, redundancies at local companies. David, are you wanting to lead off on this?
Yes, please, if I may, Chairman. And I do so because the area committee, or the area covered by the area committee, has seen around about 1,000 job losses announced in recent weeks and the last couple of months. And I think most people are aware of those, but I don't think that it has really sunk in just how much impact those reductions in the size of the workforce will have. And so, I mean, we did consider it at the area committee, and it is on the agenda for next week's full council meeting. So I don't really want to steal the thunder of I think Councillor Tom Whip, who's moving a resolution at the council. But I think we need to look as a council, at this committee, pragmatically about how we can work with other agencies such as the Lancashire Enterprise Partnership, perhaps the County Council, and well, whoever we can work with to try and mitigate the impact of those job losses, and also importantly try and put things in place that the people who are being made redundant, give them support in terms of finding fresh jobs and training and the like. So I mean, substantially, we can leave the debate to next week, but perhaps it would be helpful. I'll just share this screen with you, if I may. I think it's this one. So you should be seeing a graphic there, which Rolls-Royce in Bonalswick. And this was a report that was produced by Rolls-Royce in 2018, when there were significantly more jobs in Bonalswick, but £1.1 billion GDP contribution in the region. That's a huge amount of turnover, which is under threat just from Rolls-Royce alone. And clearly, in terms of the supply chain, £200 million spent in the region. We're already seeing engineering job losses beyond Rolls-Royce's. We've got 125 going at Westons, and many of the smaller businesses are badly affected as well. So that's one issue. But then if you look at this further chart that we've got, he says, not being able to find it, so I'll just take that one down. If you look at this scheme, and this is part of the same report that Rolls-Royce produced 2 years ago. So, in terms of enterprise, 704 patents, the involvement of university technology centres, the investment that they've made in Bonalswick, and the development of future talent, and then the impact of community, the work with schools and the like, to develop skills. And we can see all this going down the road. We can see all this disappearing to Singapore. So it's vital that Pendle Council does everything in its power, first of all, to prevent the jobs disappearing down the road to Singapore. And we are involved with a massive campaign to try and prevent that from happening. And then secondly, we mitigate any job losses that there are. We can already see jobs going, and it's not going to get any better. So, Chairman, the plea from West Craven Area Committee, and obviously it isn't an issue that's confined to West Craven, but we seem to be feeling it particularly acutely. The plea is, for us to get our thinking caps on as a council, to work with other agencies and to do what we can to keep the jobs that we can, to help support the people whose jobs are lost, and do what we can to provide future jobs for people being made redundant, but also people coming out of school, coming out of college, and looking for careers, which hopefully will be there. So I just want to propose, Chairman, that we ask our officers to come back to the next meeting of this committee with an outline of the possible steps that we can take, who we can work with, and what measures we can put in place as Pendle Council to try and improve the situation. So I'd just like to move that.
Okay, I'm just thinking, David, that rather than wait till the next meeting, obviously we've got a council meeting in a week's time, and the motion from Tom Whip is a positive motion in my opinion, and my group will be certainly supporting that, and hopefully so will the Conservatives. But I'm just wondering whether, not necessarily just asking officers, I know there's various agencies that as a number of councillors are sat here or here, that we're aware of which agencies can help us. That ahead of the meeting next week, some of that work is done informally, so as part of the resolution that Tom moves, that work has started next week, rather than waiting for a month for this meeting and then move. So, if Tom takes ownership of that, and we can collectively feed into Tom ahead of the council meeting next week, and that can be part of the resolution, then I think that's a better outcome rather than waiting 4 weeks for officers and then waiting another 4 weeks to try and arrange a meeting. If people are happy with that course of action, Mike, you've indicated you wanted to speak. Mike, you're on mute.
Sorry, Chairman, I can never get the cursor to the unmute button quick enough. Not to prolong it, it is a disaster for Pendle, but even more so for West Craven, if there is such a thing. And what concerns me, Rolls-Royce concerns me, yes, of course it does. But the knock-on effect, which a lot of people will not understand, it's not just the supply chain of Rolls-Royce, it's the supply chain of the pie shops, the sandwich shops, all the other small businesses that have built themselves up round our aerospace industry in Pendle. So it is a massive thing. So anything we can do to help this, but we mustn't underestimate this effect, knock-on effect in small communities. I've had a first-hand experience of when you are moving your business about and taking it away from one community to a larger central function. The knock-on effect to communities can be absolutely horrendous. So, I wouldn't underestimate this at all, and I would fully support, as we did in West Craven, and I'm sure we'll support hopefully everything that goes through concerning it next week. So that's all I have to say, Chairman. Thank you.
Excellent. That's fine. I can't see any other speakers. I mean, in that spirit of collaboration, then, can I thank you all for your attendance this evening, and take care, look after yourselves and your neighbours as well, and your families. And I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Take care, everybody.